And we're live. It is Tuesday, January 14th, 2024, the year of some people's Lord. 2025, sorry. It is 8 o'clock a.m. The sun is shining, the birds are chirping. It's going to be a great damn day, and TV, an revolution in morning television. You are indeed. The cactus said so, so it must be true.
The cactus has spoken.
The cactus has spoken, which is weird as hell. Look, we got a great show for you today. Ev has surprise news. We're going to be visited by the estimable Yael Eisenstat, who's got a kind of out of the frying pan into the fire story that, of going from Meta to being a target of Elon Musk. And it's a heck of a story. But first, we have an important Sudanese correction / clarification from yesterday's show. Holly, what's the issue? What do we want to clarify?
Yeah,
Clarify.
I'm paranoid, but I'm trained in paranoia, so there you go. Yeah, I think I may have given the impression that there was credence to the SAF's claims that the RSF was infiltrating aid convoys, and I don't want to, there's no justification for their blocking of aid convoys. It's not that this never happens in war where aid is misused by combatants and, but it's not an excuse for the SAF. So I just want to clarify that.
No, fair enough. If that is complete gibberish to you, as it may be, watch yesterday's show. All of those terms are defined in yesterday's show. So there we go. Holly, what's on your mind this morning while we're waiting for the other two?
Well, I am taking my son to the orthodontist right after this, and I'm hoping that he's had these, those tiny rubber bands. His care has involved these tiny rubber bands, and I'm hoping that the news will be that we're done with those, because I think you can actually go insane from tiny rubber bands.
Yeah, when I was a child with orthodonture, I had this aspiration to be able to shoot the tiny rubber bands out of my mouth.
That's what he does, because they're all over my house.
I was never able to do it, and it drove me insane because here I had the ultimate middle school, look at somebody shoot a rubber band in their face weapon, and I couldn't do it. And I practiced and practiced and practiced, and I can't tell you how many rubber bands I swallowed along the way. And it ranks among my failures in life, of which...
Well, I think we could teach you now.
Really?
The proper equipment, because he claims that he's not doing that, but there's no other explanation, because they are everywhere in my house. And I think you can actually go insane I dream about these tiny rubber bands. They're everywhere in my mind. They're like covering my thoughts.
Wow.
Yeah.
Insight into Holly Berkeley Fletcher. Okay, Ev is here, and Ev has huge news.
Oh.
So, Ev, dish.
I guess that the huge news is that I'm buying a property. Is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's big news.
It is. It is. It's a project I've been working on for a few months now, and that has finally come to fruition. Well, not yet. I still have to wait until April before closing date, which was a deliberate choice. So yeah, I fell in love with a house in Ottawa in September, which is way too large for the single person that I am.
And by too large, you mean it's like 10 bedrooms and 8 bathrooms, right?
No. Like 5 actual proper bedrooms, 2 or 3 other rooms that can serve as rooms, and 2.5 bathroom.
Yeah, it's I've seen pictures. It's think about like a glorious old Canadian house in Ottawa, and that is and so what are you going to do with all that space? Are you going to um uh find populate it with offspring? Are you going to like what's the
Mm,
goal here?
no, I don't
You're going to become
intend.
a slumlord?
Yeah, I intend to rent a bunch of rooms and kind of make it a huge, uh, no, a small rooming house. Uh, that's the goal. I'm at the point where it's still acceptable to have roommates, but I would prefer to have it uh, as a landlord than as a tenant. So that's the plan.
Excellent.
I didn't think you could own private property in socialist Canada. I thought that was
Yeah, what about that? There, isn't don't does the government tax like 95% of the proceeds?
No, it does tax a bit of it. I probably more than what people would hope for, but still totally doable. So it's not like we're not in red China, unfortunately,
Yet.
for all the yeah. No, but
well,
no. It's like
it's
the
like
Donald is gonna save us.
capitalist.
The Donald is gonna save us. Like the
That's right.
the 51st state won't be communist China.
Oh, for sure not. It'll
and
be oligarchic Russia.
and just to be clear, when you the moment you sign the closing papers, will you become a Tory voter? Because
No.
because well, just think about it. When you become a property owner, then you are one of those people that um, you know, the overregulation of the Liberal
I
Party and
mean,
its
the liberal.
NDP allies. See what I did there? Um, and you need to be freed from that, and that's what Pierre Polyev is promising you, right?
Yeah, I mean, liberals are probably going to be run by Mark Carney, former head of like a banker. The guy is a banker. So I think we're fine with, like, it's not the far left.
Well, that's what they say. That's how they get the camel's nose under the tent, Ev. But, they're coming for you and your property and your ability to do renovations without asking anybody's permission. And I'm just telling you, once you own property, those get off my back, don't tread on me instincts start kicking in. And before you know it, you have a giant tractor trailer to convoy across town and block traffic in your own city.
It's true. It's true. I had a great idea for an addition to our home, and I like had it all planned out in my mind, and then it turns out there's regulations in Arlington County about how much of your land you can fill with house, which was surprising to me because the neighbor's house literally fills the entire lot. And the other neighbor's house, they built a massive garage like on our fence line. So this was news to me, but I was told like it can't be done because of regulations. And so that's when I joined the militia. And we do exercises out in the Shenandoah. And,
You
we have
bivouac at the
we have
cabin in the
things that I will
woods.
not reveal here regarding Arlington County regulations.
Yeah,
Have
I'm
you
just
read the piece about the guy who spy on the militia who was like training
Oh
them?
yeah, ProPublica. Yeah.
Yes, it was a great piece.
Yeah, I think he's a little bit crazy, but good. I mean, service to humanity, right?
all right. So there is Yael. Hello, Yael Eisenstat.
Good morning. I'm testing out my brand new microphone. Does it work?
It does. We hear you loud and clear. Your voice is crystalline and beautiful amidst the ether. Welcome to Dog Shirt TV, Yael. You're a great American, and it's great to see your face.
Thank you. I only wake up this early. Well, I always wake up this early. I only speak this early for people such as yourselves who are wonderful. So happy to be here.
So let me first of all introduce you to Eve Gaumont, who is, as her tagline says, an Ottawa rooming house operator.
Among
But
other
she,
things.
among other things. But let's start by having you explain how you and Holly happen to know each other, because you guys occupy very different parts of my brain. I'm not enough of a neuroscientist to describe which parts you were each in, but let's just say they're not the same parts, and I was surprised to know that you knew each other. So, how do you know Holly, and have you ever appeared in one of her videos?
Not yet. She will
Holly, I
never.
love
He
you.
won't stop me.
I was gonna say I love you, but it's not going to happen. I already have enough of the world's richest men not liking me. Yeah, it's actually funny. I think the way I connected the dots that Holly knew you was watching Holly, like, sorry if this is inappropriate, fangirl the Bulwark a bit and some of you guys. And then I was like, I think I hang out with a lot of the people that you like. But Holly and I have some similar work experiences, although I don't know if we ever worked in the building at the same time.
We
I
worked on a project together once.
See, I'm so old, I don't even remember these things. So yeah, I started my career at CIA many, many moons ago, back in just before September 11th, in like early 2000. So we overlapped there for a bit. And then the funny thing is, I don't know if there's many people, I don't think there's almost anyone I still talk to from those days, not because they weren't lovely, but just my life has gone in so many different directions. But Holly is one of those people that I've held on to since leaving.
Well,
Super cool. And just to bring viewers up to speed, you have, I think, one of the, I would say, most frying pan to the fire kind of stories of people of my acquaintance, the possible exception of which is Jim Baker, who went from being general counsel of the FBI to being deputy general counsel of Twitter before Elon Musk bought it. And, he got, but you have a kind of similar thing. You went from Facebook during the election of 2016 to being the ADL's point person on content moderation issues during the Musk takeover. So just like walk us through the Yael Eisenstat story here. And did you set out to piss off all of the world's richest men, or was it done effortlessly?
That's the key question. Because my first pissing off of world's rich men actually started with our incoming president. Um, yeah,
Well, he doesn't really count as one of the world's richest men.
fair point.
That's a
You're right.
that's a
So,
fraud.
did you see me pause after I said that? Because I was like, well, maybe that wasn't the right explanation.
Yeah, maybe most powerful.
Yes.
on paper, in fictional documentation, he's one of the world's richest men.
Super fair point, which is why I paused as soon as I said it. Yeah, so I left government in 2013. And when this story gets too long and rambling, just cut me off. My
No,
cough
we
is just
will.
starting to kick in.
Rambling is part of the show here because on normal television, you're not allowed to ramble, as you know from doing TV hits. At some point, somebody comes into your ear and says, break, break,
Or they just interrupt you.
or they just interrupt you. But here, this is a revolution in morning television. We let people finish their thoughts.
Evolution. Okay, so the coffee's gonna kick in, and so I left government in 2013. 2015. So in government, a lot of what I had done is, and again, I started before September 11th, but became this counter extremism person, having spent a few years heading a lot of our sort of counter extremism work in East Africa. So in 2015, started realizing that we were being radicalized here in the US, very similar ways that I had seen happening in other parts of the world. So I actually started speaking out about that. But the way I started pissing off powerful men, not necessarily the richest men, was in 2016. It's interesting. I had reinvented myself as a private citizen. I like to joke with Holly. I like to act like I'm a lot older than her, even though I like to act like I'm decades older than her.
I think you're younger than me.
I'm like a few months older than you. But I like to say in my day, we didn't really talk about being at the CIA when we left. And I don't know if you remember Trump's speech at the CIA in front of the Wall of Stars, and like 8 million things happened after that. But that was the first time I pissed someone off. I wrote a piece that ran in the New York Times about his speech at the CIA, and the star on the wall behind him that represented my past colleague, my colleague who had died in service. And it really got under his skin because I'm the one who pointed out that the CIA doesn't sit in front of their commander in chief until he tells them to, because he bragged about his standing ovation.
Just a brief clarification for those who do not know the CIA wall. In the front hall of the CIA, which is a large marble room, there is a wall that has a star for each CIA officer who has been killed in service over the course of the life of the CIA. There are actually remarkably few, and but there's probably about, I don't know, 60 or 70, would you say?
Oh, I'm not sure on numbers, but yeah, like they all fit on this one wall.
It all fits on one wall, and some of them, in one of the most moving aspects of the wall, don't have a name next to them because their identities, unlike Holly Berkeley Fletcher's and Yael Eisenstat's, are still protected. So when that is what Yael is referring to when and Trump gave a speech to CIA personnel early in his first term.
A1.
It was day one. Yeah. Right. He was inaugurated like on a Friday, and it was on a Saturday morning, and he did it in front of the wall. And that is simply not done to sort of politicize that space. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, and what's interesting, you mentioned the anonymity of the stars. The person that I wrote about when I was working there, his name hadn't been public yet. So I wrote about him and anonymously, and then I started doing my research and realized they had actually publicized his name just a few years before then. So then I really actually got to tell his story, which was more what the piece was about. It wasn't about me, it was about him. So he also, people might recall, that's where he bragged about his inauguration numbers, and bragged about the CIA giving him a standing ovation, which I'm sure they did, but he made it sound like they never wanted to sit down. And I watched his video, and I watched a video when Obama did a speech there, which, by the way, was like some grainy video that someone did on their phone. He didn't bring press with him because you're not supposed to. Obama immediately told the CIA, thank you, and sit down. So anyway, long story short.
And he also bragged during the speech that almost all CIA personnel voted for him.
He said, raise your hands if you didn't vote for me, or something like that. And it was all those things. That's why I wrote the piece. To me, we had all, those of us who studied authoritarian regimes or really terrible things around the world, knew all the signs of what is very frightening. And that's, to me, I think in the piece it said something about this was a page out of an authoritarian's playbook. But the comment that I made, which went sort of spread, was the fact that he didn't tell the CIA to sit down. And that got under his skin. So at CPAC that year, he started when people were applauding him, he's like, sit down, sit down. If you don't, that liberal media is gonna say, I told you not to sit down. I was like, oh, okay, yep. He read the piece. So that's where I started pissing people off. But I guess it's kind of who I am. I don't really care who I'm speaking out against. I care about what the issue is. And if I don't feel like people are seeing it enough, you probably saw it. Like, I don't know you well enough, Eve, but probably you as well. But Holly and Ben, I know you could understand what was happening, but I felt like a lot of the public didn't. So
No,
anyway,
I think that's right. I think how shocking that initial thing was not partly because it was in the throes of the first days of the administration, partly because it's a space that it's not like going to Arlington Cemetery and doing something offensive, which he's also done, by the way, but we'd gotten used to it by then. It's a place that the civic sanctity of which is a little bit less publicized, and I think it's a little bit more like, I don't know, taking a dump on the Resolute desk or something. It's just it's a little bit more private because of the nature of the space, and it did require some explanation, um, which the I think the press was not in a kind of leading in a early sort of sign of the way Trump confused things. The press was not all that well positioned to do, because you have to explain the civic sanctity of the space.
yeah, I think what's interesting there, and I know we're talking a lot about this story. I just saw what's written under my name, Foe of the World. Man, that's really funny. Might need to screenshot that one.
It's one of the things about, being a revolution in morning television is I get to decide what
Love
people's
it.
chyrons are. And I usually do it by contact. So you'll see Ev is Ottawa rooming house operator.
I don't see Ev's cryon there or descriptor. I
You
don't know
don't?
where it is. Yeah, you need to fix that. But anyway,
Yeah, I don't either unless it's because she's wearing a white top. I don't know. Maybe I'm not seeing it either. But
Huh.
I bet you Ben can fix that now while I continue.
I'm
to
working
sample.
on it.
So what's interesting in that moment too is, as I said, I had reinvented myself as a private citizen. That was actually the most frightening day of my life, not because I was afraid to piss off Trump, but because I'd been carrying this secret. I didn't have to, but I'd been carrying this CIA secret my whole life. None of my friends knew I worked there. I mean, a lot of them probably figured it out, but I never said it. So going that public in the New York Times and then on CNN the next day, I like hid under a blanket that night. I mean, like ex-boyfriends didn't know. I got some weird, like, wait a minute phone calls after that one. But anyway, so now fast forward 2016, I'm writing more and more and speaking more and more about how we're becoming radicalized in the US. And a little added context to that, I was at the National Counterterrorism Center. I was a senior intel officer there. I was in charge of the president's daily brief when I was there. I remember when we were going through not wanting to call domestic terrorism terrorism. I remember those conversations of how fraught that is to in any way equate an American with with a foreign terrorist, like in any way act like these are similar issues. So I was bringing that lens into like, oh no, I'm seeing the exact same steps to radicalization, the exact same like characterizations, but at a totally different scale. And not saying it's all because of social media. I've never said it's all social media's fault, but I was seeing how people were becoming radicalized in large part online. So that's what got me starting to speak out about social media's role in it, which then got Facebook to hire me probably to try to silence a critic. And they brought me in actually in 2018, right after the Cambridge Analytica scandal.
Sorry, I had this. I
That's
had
all
the
right. I'm not
had
responsible for for whatever happened in 2016 at Facebook.
right. So, all right. You said they brought you in to silence a critic.
Like, people ask me why they hired me because the story is so weird after that, and I always say that's the one question I can't answer. I mean, I had started speaking publicly. I had written this piece actually before the Trump op-ed that was in Time Magazine. The title sounded ridiculous at the time, but you know you don't get to write your own titles. Now the title sounds quaint. In 2015, the title was "American Hate is a Bigger Threat Than Foreign Terrorists."
Right.
And
Super provocative in 2015. Super
obvious.
obviously right now.
That's the point. I was like, wait, that's a crazy title. And now I'm like, oh, how cute and quaint.
Yeah.
um, so I had started speaking at tech conferences and whatnot and going on podcasts about social media companies. So they hired me on day one. They hired me as their global head of elections integrity on the advertising side. On day two, before I'd done anything wrong, or they could accuse me of doing anything wrong, because all I'd done is go to orientation and eat like free kale omelets and like smoothies and whatnot. They
You had too many kale smoothies.
There is no way you have too many. The free food, I will say, man, woo, the food at Menlo Park campus is there's a whole roof. Like there's a roof garden. You'll love that story. Totally need to go back to the roof garden grilled cheese story. But because it involves veterans and it will be very dog shirt TV-ish. But on day two, they told me that they were changing my title, that they're rethinking my whole position, and my title is now manager. So I went from global head of elections integrity to manager.
Manager of election integrity
Just
or just
manager.
manager?
Just
Manager of kale smoothies, maybe.
manager. In the same office, but just manager. So yeah, that's what happened there. I obviously spent the next 5 or 6 months trying to do my job. But as we know, my attempts to try to make sure that voter suppression wasn't happening in political advertising, which is what I thought I was hired to do, was absolutely struck down. And remember, after I left, Mark Zuckerberg made it very clear that he would never fact check a politician, which in order to make sure voter suppression wasn't happening in political advertising, guess who was violating that the most? Certain political people. And no matter what people say, the research has proven it. Don't take my word for it. But that meant actioning people on the right more than others.
And so do you what is your this is a little bit of divergence from the Yael story, but
the Yael story is going to take a full hour, so that's
I know. So we're gonna detour as needed to other things. What do you make of what Zuckerberg did last week? I mean, this is a heck of a coda to the, hire Yael and then don't let her do any work story.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. I was asked that on a news show the other day, and I think the reporter expected me to be shocked, and I was like, oh yeah, this didn't surprise me at all. And the reporter's face when I said that was pretty funny. Like, that's not what she expected. It is just absolutely, it's not new. What's new is how brazen it is. So before, listen, Mark Zuckerberg's interest has never been about making sure that you and I can connect and share cute pictures of our dogs, right? Like, that's not his intent.
Your dog is very cute, though.
He is. Thank you. His intent, forget that he actually founded, his origins were about rating women without their consent on college campuses. But his intent was to recklessly scale globally thanks to the incredibly not just lax, but I would say subsidized legal environment in the US, because he's not responsible for anything, to dominate the world's way of communicating. That wasn't because he wants us all to have free speech. That's a business and a power move. I think with him, it was a power move. He wants to dominate this landscape. And he is at least smart enough to know if you want to do that, you have to cozy up to any regime, especially in the US, who most threatens your power. And so that I remember, I'll give you a perfect example. I remember when this was after I left, Biden complained about to Facebook at the time about a fake ad that was running about him. Rightfully so. I mean, it was very much an altered, I think if I recall correctly, it was an altered video. And Facebook responded, and I'll never forget, it was signed by Katie Harbath, and I bring that up for a reason. In responding to Joe Biden, it wasn't even Mark or Cheryl or Nick Clegg who signed it. They made it clear to Biden, you're not even important enough for us to have our top people sign this basically screw you letter to you. So they had Katie Harbath, who was the director of elections integrity work on the policy side, sign this letter to him telling him, like, we believe that political speech is the most scrutinized speech in the world, and therefore we won't take this down. Which was amazing to me. First of all, the arrogance in which they spoke to him made it clear to me they are not afraid of the Democrats at all. Like, at all. Not afraid of them at all. Regardless of all of them complaining now about boo-hoo, the Democrats tried to regulate us, they're not afraid of them. Because when Trump would complain to them, boy, would they jump. And that's what we saw Mark do this last week. So when I saw Mark Zuckerberg after I left in 2019 make some big proclamation about how he wouldn't fact check political candidates, it was very clearly on the heels of pretty powerful people on the right starting to spin up this BS story about how they censor the right and that they're censoring conservative voices, which every ounce of data shows is not true. Well, not every ounce. Every ounce of reputable data shows is not true. And so he's just doing the same thing, but much more brazenly now. I do think, I will say though, part of me, on the one hand, I know that this is a quid pro quo. Oh, I said it right. I usually can't say quid pro quo. Quid pro quo. He wants Trump to, he doesn't just want it. He said it publicly that he is going to enlist Trump to pressure governments around the world to not regulate Meta. That is an absolute brazen thing to say out loud. Those are the deals they used to make in back rooms quietly, trying to curry favor with governments. Now he's just announcing it. So it's a political play. It's what Zuckerberg's been doing all along, but just much more brazenly. But now he's also rolling back policies to appeal to the far right. Because what he didn't announce publicly was all the hate speech policies that he rolled back at the same time. I mean, everything that he did this week appeased Trump, gonna make extremism flourish even more on the platform if he truly does what he's saying he's gonna do, which I'm pretty sure he will. But I sat and listened to the 3 hours of him talking to Joe Rogan. You're welcome. So you don't have to. I'm happy to give, because that was
I'm not going to do that.
It was the worst 3 hours. It took me 2.5 days to get through it.
Yikes.
But I'm glad I did, because there is a third factor that I haven't written or spoken about as much. And it is the evolution of Mark Zuckerberg sounding like he's really entered the manosphere as well. They spent almost a full hour talking about martial arts, and like Joe Rogan was giving him tips on how to do lunges and squats, and that's when I was like, oh, this is not just what's best for my business. This is also like manosphere talk, and make Joe Rogan think
a full hour on lunges and squats, don't you think, Ben?
Well, I think, this is making me think that my investment in Get Ready With Me videos is exactly the wrong direction. I mean, I'm dolling up in preparation for these hearings, and I'm not doing the lunges and squats, and my image is, I think maybe I should be doing vitamin supplements
And
instead.
talking about how you like killing animals with bows and arrows better than with guns, and then
Bare hands,
spending
dude.
minutes on why.
Maybe we should just
Bows
kill.
and arrows are for wusses.
Oh, Joe
If
Rogan and
you
Mark
don't
Zuckerberg
do
would
it with
disagree.
your bare hands,
Oh,
you're halfway to wokeism.
yeah. I have a question, if you don't mind me jumping in, Ben. So, do these guys, and they're all guys, well, I guess Sheryl Sandberg, there's a few women.
By the way, I give no forgiveness to Cheryl for the things that happened under her watch either. Sorry, go on.
Anyway, they're mainly, it's a bro culture. If you took, I realize that they're obviously motivated primarily by money and protecting their business interests and so on and so forth. But if you sort of took away their companies or whatever and just like what is Mark Zuckerberg politically, just innately? Like what would he be?
So it's interesting. People have asked me that a lot over the years, and I've always said I'm not even going to try to get inside Mark Zuckerberg's head. I don't think so. This is where I think Mark and Elon are different. I don't know that I can figure out Mark Zuckerberg's politics, and I don't really know if it matters. With Elon, it's a different story. And here's what I mean by that. I think Mark Zuckerberg's ideology is money and power. I say power as much as money. He's got enough money. Why does he still keep going? I think he's the guy who probably didn't get laid in high school, and he like listening him talk to Joe Rogan was so much the kid who wants to sound cool. You could tell when Joe Rogan lost him, like when Joe was starting to talk about all these different bows and arrows, and Mark would just go, acting like he knew what the hell he was talking about. He deeply wants to be viewed as cool, but you might recall if you read the book An Ugly Truth by the two New York Times journalists. There's a chapter in there where they discuss his motto at Facebook in the early days was company over country. Let that sink in. Company over country. Everyone likes to think of like the well, I don't think so anymore, but as these like left-leaning lefties, I don't know. Maybe Mark Zuckerberg used to be a lefty at some time. I would say probably much more libertarian and much more just it's all about me. I don't know if he's a Republican or a Democrat. I think he's all about power and money. Whereas Musk is a different story, and I'm sure we'll get to that. I'm sorry, my story is like taking a full hour. But
We're telling a lot of other stories
Yeah.
through it.
But it's a fair question, Holly, because that's what people keep trying to figure out. And at this point, which is, I think, a little bit manosphere-ish, and I know we haven't even talked about what the manosphere is, but listening to him on Rogan made me realize I think he is actually making an ideological shift here, not just a business shift. In 2019, when he spoke about why he won't fact check political ads, I took that as purely a business decision. And that's when I spoke out about my time at Facebook, and that's when I pissed them off. But now I think it's both a business decision and possibly he's becoming more ideologically aligned. But I
Ask
don't,
a question.
yeah,
No, go ahead.
I don't think he is the guy who wants to see Nazis marching in the street, whereas like Musk literally helped send Nazis after me and my colleagues. Like that's where it's different. But I do think he's becoming more and more ideologically aligned with elements of the far right, but in a different way, if that makes sense. Sorry, Eve, you were going to ask. Ev? Did I say Eve and it's actually Ev?
It's Ev, but no worries. I'm fine with both. So yeah, one minor digression without going back to your story about political ads. We know that it's never been the point that we would be like, Facebook was never going to fact check ads, but they at least implemented ad libraries and stuff. Do you think that these things are also likely to be shut down, or is it the next step after?
That's a fair question. So I was actually there when we were building the ad library. That was kind of part of what I was brought in. They had built it just before I arrived, and we were figuring out all the policies and whatnot. I imagine they probably won't, in particular because of the EU, but I don't know. I will say, listen, Meta's ad library is at least some form of transparency, which other companies do not have. Like, I'll give them credit for that. That said, it's kind of a bare minimum. And what I mean by that is it doesn't show you the information that I think is actually truly important. Like, how is this ad targeted? How, like, what characteristics did they use to actually target these ads? For example, when Elon Musk funded an org, which funded an org, so it was all dark money by the time it got to paying for Facebook ads, for ads of Kamala Harris saying she hates Israel, targeting Jews in Pennsylvania, and ads of Kamala Harris saying she hates Palestine, targeting Muslims in Michigan. Those ads all ran on the platform. And it was very difficult to figure out that they were funded by Elon Musk. Like, you had to be able to do a whole chain of events to figure that out. It was also complicated. You couldn't truly understand who they were targeting in it. These are the reasons why it's not just about fact checking. The meta ad library, for example, the disclaimer, which is not really a disclaimer, I think it's the wrong word, the disclosure paid for by, right? You have to say paid for by whatever. I don't know if this changed, but when I was there, you could write whatever the frick you wanted. You could say paid for by a dude who likes to wear dog shirts. You could write that on your ad.
Maybe I should try.
You should try. As long as it does tie on the back end to a page where they know who you are. How is that helping me as a consumer actually understand who paid for that ad, right? So it's yes, there's transparency built in, which is a good thing. No, it's not true transparency. Yes, it can be totally manipulated. And I don't think he'll shut it down because the EU now, although he's going to try to get Trump to force the EU to back down on regulation. So I don't know where that's going to go. It is one of the few tools that allows researchers to at least be able to do some research so that I could talk about what I just talked about, right? The fake Harris ads. But it's really bare minimum, like bare minimum. Well, I shouldn't say bare minimum. It has improved over the years and it is better than any of the other platforms, but it could definitely be better. Oh no, I just said be better. Don't let me say that again.
All right. I want to push back to
The story.
the story. So you leave Facebook and what happens?
Yes.
How did you go from merely pissing off two of the world's most powerful men to a third plus, becoming a sort of, continue the story.
Sure. So I left in 2018. And by left, I mean, I was pushed out. I went and let them HR. Once you talk to HR at a company like that, you've sealed your own fate. And I knew that. And I told HR, if you don't move me to a part of the company where I'm empowered to do the job you hired me for, I'm going to leave. So they fired me abruptly after I said that. But I wasn't planning to speak out. Listen, speaking out against a company like that is career suicide. I know people who don't know me think that I just love to be on the news and it's somehow super benefiting me. It is not. Like, you don't get job offers again after you speak out against a company like that. So I didn't speak out right away. It took me 8 months before I kind of went nuclear on them after hearing Mark Zuckerberg just lie. And so, yeah, pissed them off. That didn't do me well for a few years. Spent a few years trying to recover and find work. And then finally got hired by ADL to head the Center for Technology and Society, doing the same exact kind of work of, like, not just content moderation, but really trying to figure out what accountability can look like for how these companies themselves contribute to the proliferation of hate and extremism. I think that's a really important point. Like, ADL helped champion transparency legislation, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, for people who, just for clarity here, for people who think of ADL as an organization that makes statements when people say things that are anti-Semitic or anti-Israel, it actually has an enormous depth of work from on all kinds of policy issues. It's one of the most sophisticated of the Jewish community organizations, just in terms of the depth and diversity of its, everything from very serious research on global anti-Semitism attitudes, to really like hiring people like Yael to do platform content moderation, monitoring, and that sort of thing. So it's an organization whose public face and private work can be, I wouldn't say dissonant with one another, but one does not quite prepare you for the other.
Yeah, that's accurate. Like it's really there's the inside and outside game, right? There's the public comments, but there's also like my team helped write and get anti-doxing legislation passed in states around the country. So like really important policy work. Anyway, so fast forward, then Elon Musk buys Twitter. So that was fun. That happened while I was there. And we met with him early on, a small group of us, myself, Jonathan, and like 3 or 4 other leaders of big organizations.
Just say who Jonathan is.
Sorry, Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO of ADL. And we met with Musk early on. It was right before a midterm election. And we basically just said, here are some of the things you're inheriting. And we broke it down to 3 things that we were hoping he would do. Let's be clear. I mean, some of us knew he wouldn't, but let's get him to publicly commit to these 3 things before this midterm election. And then we would like circle back and see how we can help work with him.
And just to be clear, the concern about Musk was that he had basically promised to let all the Nazis back on the platform.
Not yet at that point, but he was hinting at it. So this was so early on and we knew this was coming and our asks were not that big. So he ended up publicly tweeting, tagging my name about having met with us and what he promised to do. One was not to re-platform anybody without a clear and transparent process. I'm pretty sure he removed the word transparent from it, maybe, but that was it. We didn't say don't, like we wanted to know that there was a clear and transparent process to why. One was to enforce and resource his elections policies, at least through that midterm election. Resource meant don't fire all your staff because we knew that was coming. And the third, he was talking about like disbanding the Trust and Safety Council, which we are members of, and creating some new advisory. God, it feels like 70 years ago. I can't remember what it was exactly called. And the third was just to engage with civil society before doing so and like making sure he includes civil society. They were not huge asks. And like he tweeted about meeting with us. And then like the next day he ended up firing half of the trust and safety team. And so we joined others in talking about why that was really dangerous. And so then he, without naming us, basically called us all the enemies of democracy. And it all went downhill from there. But then you're right. So then he gave this general amnesty to people to come back on the platform. And I don't know that people fully understand what that means. It doesn't just mean letting people I disagree with back on the platform. I actually like being on platforms with people I disagree with. Like I'm enjoying Blue Sky, but I'm not enjoying how everybody's blocking everybody that they don't agree with. It means letting people back on the platform who had doxed people, who had engaged in like true threats, like white supremacists, Nazis, letting people who weren't just kicked off for disagreeing, for violating the worst of their policies, and letting them all back on the platform. And for just $8 a month, getting a blue check, which means that your content is prioritized. So now you even get to pay to be boosted and recommended to people. And that is just, I don't have to explain why, since like I've been rambling forever, but that is so dangerous. So we did the work we do. We didn't just scream about content moderation. I had a really legitimate research team, and we continue to research these things. And we continue to put out reports showing like the rise in extremism on the platform, or like the 919% increase in anti-Semitic posts. And Musk didn't love that. And while I continued to do my work a little bit more quietly, he and Jonathan got into like public spats via the media. And the next thing we know, and someone whose name I won't mention because I don't want to amplify him, but a known white supremacist, put out this ban the ADL hashtag, and Musk amplified it. And the next thing we knew, it wasn't just everybody coming for us online. Like, there were Nazis actually marching in the street, I think in Georgia, like full swastikas and everything, chanting ban the ADL. You had a known white supremacist lure into ADL local employees and like film them under the false pretense of being a potential donor and then putting these videos out. Like, people's lives were at risk because of this activity. And then, of course, Musk blamed us for the fact that advertisers were leaving the platform. And we were like,
Right, and he
we're not.
sued you, right?
He threatened to. He started threatening to sue us. We were the first org that he really publicly started threatening to sue. Obviously, you know, I won't go into great detail at this point because I feel like we're forever under threat of litigation. And when he threatens to sue us because advertisers are leaving, first of all, there's no direct line there. Advertisers made their own decisions. We never told advertisers to leave. But second of all, that's a lot of that is me, right? It's my work. I was the head of the center that was doing all the work. So it became very complicated to operate under that environment, right? It became complicated to, on the one hand, I did still get to put out our work, but it became a lot harder. And then obviously October 7th happened. So this was all before October 7th. And then after October 7th, it just became harder in terms of like for Jonathan to balance ADL priorities. Is it a bigger priority for me to focus on anti-Semitism in the world or to continue this spat with Elon Musk? I would argue if Elon Musk is proliferating anti-Semitism in the world, they go hand in hand. But just it became a difficult calculation. But for me, I was very, very clear early on that I find Elon Musk to be one of the biggest threats to democracy, and I'm happy to spell out why. I think people don't fully understand the full range of that threat, and I could not continue to work in an environment where I couldn't say that and work on those issues. I mean, we parted amicably. Like, ADL understood that and was very supportive of that. But at the end of the day, journalists prodded a bunch of anonymous sources, wrote a big story about me leaving and about it being all about Musk. And again, that doesn't help you career-wise necessarily.
So what are you doing now?
So I teamed up with the team at Cybersecurity for Democracy, which is out of Northeastern and NYU. A lot of people are familiar with Laura Edelson's work. She's this amazing computer scientist, and her partner Damon McCoy, he's at NYU, she's at Northeastern. They're the ones who actually they're the poster children for some of the first ones who Meta tried to like.
And Laura Edelson, by the way, who has been on this show in its prior incarnation, back when Facebook or Meta cut her off from...
She's still cut off, by the way.
Yeah, I know. Back when they first cut her off from access to their data, she came on the show and we had a long conversation about it. That's back somewhere in the In Lieu of Fun
I have
archives.
to find that one. So yeah, I teamed up with them because what I really love working with them is they're true computer science researchers who understand how these systems work and are exposing how algorithms themselves are working. And I, as a policy person, am taking that research and helping translate it into actual policy solutions, which you don't find in academic centers a lot, that combination. So I joined as a fellow, hoping to get enough funders to care to really build this into a full fleshed out center. But I am working on, I mean, the hill just got exponentially steeper, but I will continue to work on what accountability looks like for how these platforms, not for how they moderate speech, but for how their own tools contribute to either illegal activity or things like extremism. And so partnering with Laura and Damon has been awesome. We are hoping to, this is my fundraising pitch. We are hoping to grow the center so that like it really becomes a full thing. But I think we've done pretty awesome work for the first year already. That's had real impact. So that's what we're doing. I'm not backing down from these men. Let's be very clear. That's the punchline. I am not backing down from this.
Can you elaborate just on that point, that teaser you put out there about why you think Elon is so dangerous
Sure.
if you care to?
Sure. So, I mean, it's not just, I know a lot of people are like, oh, we can't wait until Trump and Elon fall out and Trump pushes out Elon. And I'm like, that's not going to happen. I mean, it might happen the other direction, but Musk is not, first of all, he's way richer than Trump, but he's also in some aspects more powerful. Not completely, but in some aspects. It's not just because, oh, you've got people that you can't get down from space. Well, I'm not going to help you with that now at this point. Or, oh, you don't like what I have to say? I'll turn off Starlink over like North Dakota during the next election. There are all those elements and all the government contracts. But I also think, and this isn't talked about much, I don't know that I want to talk about this publicly much. I don't want to put ideas in people's heads. But when he bought Twitter, he also, let's be clear, he bought it so he could silence critics because his feelings were hurt that people were talking about him a certain way, and he 100% puts his fingers on the scale. I don't follow the man, and he's top of my feed every single day. But he also bought every DM ever sent between anyone since the day that platform was created. Do you know how many journalists and dissidents spoke to each other via DMs on Twitter? Do you know how I am sure that many people in the incoming administration have things in DMs on Twitter that they do not want people to know about? And the idea that, but we deleted them. Try downloading your Twitter data. There will be a file there that says deleted DM.
Yeah, I promise they are not deleted in the sense that they cannot be accessed.
Yeah. So he has all the so-called private messaging. As much as I don't love Mark Zuckerberg, at least WhatsApp is at least encrypted. He has all the private messaging from years there. He has his fingers on the scale of how that, and I do fundamentally believe he put his finger on the scale of this last election as well. So there's so much power caught up with him. And unlike, I'm not sure about Mark Zuckerberg, I do think Elon Musk is absolutely ideological as well. He has made that very clear. So I just think and I've known, and I was trying to say this well over a year ago, 2 years ago, the dangers of this particular individual. And here we are. I think people have no idea how much, I mean, you guys do, but the public has no idea how much he truly influenced this election in so many different ways. The billions of dollars, or I don't know, tens and hundreds of millions of dollars he spent even just on absolutely false and manipulative ads on Facebook alone, which has been written about in the Washington Post and others, is like insane. But yeah.
Right. And much more significant than Russian efforts to influence the 2016 election.
And that example I gave, sorry, really quickly, about him funding these ads at like targeted Jews with Harris hates Israel and Muslims with Harris hates Palestine. It's not just about intervening in our election. That was fundamentally so more division in our country. And that is what we were so angry at the Russians for, which I am still angry at them. Elon Musk himself helped fund that. Like, he helped fund a campaign that was pitting Jews and Muslims against each other in the US. I need people to let that sink in. That is fundamentally helping sow more division and hatred in this country, which goes far beyond just trying to support an election. And that should make people angry. See, now I'm angry. That should make people angry.
I'm super angry. I've been angry for so long.
Well, be more angry, Holly.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to make a parody about Elon. What song would be appropriate?
I am not participating in that. I have enough troubles.
Probably shouldn't do that. See, I'm now scared. Do you, just quick question, we're running out of time, but, and I don't know if you can, if you can't answer this or don't want to, please just say.
I'll go like that if I can't.
Okay. Do you worry about your own sort of personal liability? Have they gone after you legally at all, or?
I thought you were going to say safety, but liability
Well,
is
that
a totally
too,
different
but
question.
So safety, I think, is a given. All these trolls know who you are, and whatever. But in terms of like your legal vulnerability,
Great question. In terms of me having ever done anything wrong or illegal, absolutely not. But that's not the point. When they come after you, it's not because they actually think they can win. It's the cruelty of
they have the money and you don't, so it doesn't
matter.
matter.
In litigation, they will take, and like if you get to that point, then you also, everything you've ever done becomes discoverable. Like that. Sure, there's a part of me that recognizes if someone decides to come after me personally, that, I mean, Ben and I have mutual friends that this has happened to. Like that becomes all encompassing and horrible. I believe that one thing that because I have always chosen to speak in true name as opposed to anonymously, there is a track record of who I am and what I stand for out in the world. And I believe that enough people would have my back if that happens. I don't, but yes, it would be horrible. Especially if like the Jim Jordans of the world decide to come after me. But I stand by everything I've ever said and written, and I'm solid with the methodology of everything we've ever done. Like if you read our reports, they're very like detailed in our methodology and how we did it. But it would suck. Like, let's be clear. I've already had such a hard time with like Mark and Cheryl making sure I don't get hired. There's lots of stories there. Oh, the grilled cheese, we didn't get to that, but that's fine. And like Musk also helping try to come after us. I don't need the legal headache, but I am confident that people would both support me or whoever they come after and that we would win. That's the thing. I will not stand down to a bully. And you, like the richest man in the world, caring about this woman who lives in a 1-bedroom apartment and is like hoping that like the kindness of strangers will allow me to continue to work is like insane. But that's called punching down, and that's what they do.
We're going to leave it on that cheerful note. I will say one thing about Yael, which is it's fair to say we've been in touch through some of the worst times. Is that fair?
Yeah.
And Yael's public face and the private face are remarkably similar. So it's not like she's saying this in public and then when she calls you and you talk privately, she's like, oh, I'm going to give up, or how do, like she's, this is who she is. And I have a lot of time for it. Folks, we got, a bunch of cool shows coming up, but I don't know in what order. We have a Jack Smith report released at 1 o'clock this morning. May have a discussion of it tomorrow. We certainly will have a discussion of it on Lawfare, along with the Pete Hegseth nomination hearing, which is going to start in half an hour today after the hearing is over. We also have a spree of nomination hearings in addition to Pete Hegseth coming up, which we will be discussing, not in the form of makeup videos, though I do encourage you all to check out the Kash Patel Get Ready With Me video, which I released last night and which is smoking. I even got a text message from Ev about the leather jacket in it. And so, we're chugging along. We will be back both tomorrow and Thursday and Friday with stuff on the various goings on. I don't know what order it's going to be in or who the guests will be, but join us and find out. Cheers, guys. Thanks, Yael.